What if that really hard place you're in right now, your biggest setback, the thing that feels like it's just completely silencing you, what if that's actually a setup?
A setup for the advancement of something way bigger than you.
Exactly.
That's the paradox, isn't it? It's what the Apostle Paul is getting at, and he's writing from a Roman jail. We've been digging into Pastor Florin's recent message on this from
Yeah,
Philippians.
the Unshakable series. And this one really forces you to put down the emotional lens and pick up a spiritual one,
It really does, and that's our whole mission today, right? To get into the pastor's raw notes behind that sermon and unpack this really radical claim.
which is that neither suffering our tames nor even the messy flaws of human leaders can actually stop the gospel's advance.
Mm. And this isn't just theory, it's about that day-to-day, that apprenticeship under Jesus.
Right. And the pastor grounds that whole idea in what Jesus said about seeking first God's kingdom.
hmm Matthew 6.33. It's foundational. Because when you become a follower of Jesus, you're not just like joining a club, you're being adopted into a nation, a culture, the kingdom of God. And if that kingdom is advancing, everything else starts to look a little different.
Okay, so let's get into that first big point, this idea of a divine reversal.
Yeah.
Paul's under house arrest, he's chained up, and he says, what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel.
Yeah.
I mean, how does that even work? How does being tied up lead to advancement? It flies in the face of all common sense.
It's pure kingdom logic. Our systems see isolation and think, okay, it's over. But God sees it and thinks commissioning. It's like Joseph telling his brothers, you meant this for evil, but God meant it for good.
So Paul's chains weren't just confinement.
No, they were a strategic deployment. And in the pastor's notes, he really dug into this need for a mental shift. He called it a correct spiritual perspective, a CSP.
Instead of just being, emotionally driven by the darkness of the situation?
Exactly, because Satan's strategy is always intimidation. It's to
Yeah.
make us feel alone and useless. But God just flips the script. I mean, think about the actual logistics of Paul's chains. He was likely chained 2047 to a member of the Praetorian Guard.
And that's not just any guard detail, is it?
No, not at all. This is Rome's elite, the emperor's personal security. These are guys who would never, ever go to a synagogue or listen to some Jewish tent maker preach about a crucified Messiah.
But now they can't get away from him.
They literally can't. His prison didn't shut the gospel down. It gave it a protected, direct pipeline right into the heart of Roman power. The obstacle became the operational advantage.
Wow. Okay, so my biggest constraint could actually be my biggest opportunity for witness.
That's the idea.
And understanding that spiritual battle, that's what leads to the practical side of this apprenticeship, right? The close the ranks prayer initiative the sermon talked about.
Yes. If the spiritual warfare is real, we can't be passive. We can't be individualistic. When a battalion is under fire, they don't scatter. They close the ranks. They protect each other.
So this is us standing together, praying for the persecuted church. Places like Iran, China, North Korea.
Mm-hmm. And it's so important because their courage is the living proof that the kingdom wins, even in chains. When we pray for them, we're not just supporting family. We're drawing inspiration for our own witness.
Yeah.
I mean, if they can be loyal when facing prison or worse, we really have no excuse for being silent when all we face is, a little cultural pressure.
It puts things in perspective.
It really does.
So that courage you mentioned, it's contagious.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the next point, the advance of the church. Paul says his steadfastness emboldened other believers. They started proclaiming the gospel without fear.
Yeah, it's like one person's endurance gives everyone else permission to be bold. It's the purifying effect of pressure. And that applies directly to the kind of cultural resistance we feel today.
I think a lot of people feel that pressure to conform, the fear of, getting canceled or just being pushed to the margins.
Absolutely. But the pastor's notes were so clear on this. We have to see this resistance not as a threat that signals our defeat, but as a guaranteed opportunity.
Because the gospel thrives in hard soil.
It's designed for it. The proof is right there. I mean, the fastest growing churches in the world are in the most hostile places. Iran, China. Hostility strips away all the comfortable institutional fluff, and it forces the church back to its core mission.
And that reliance on the core mission means you have to have deep discernment. You have to know who or what you're actually fighting.
That's it. Ephesians 6.12, right. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. We're not fighting people. We're resisting these spiritual forces that promote destructive ideologies.
Okay, so what did the pastor's notes say about what those ideologies look like today?
Well, they're any system that dehumanizes people who are made in God's image. The notes called them demonic strategies because they seek to enslave. So, systems that treat women like property, or collectivist ideologies like communism that just crush the value of the individual.
The gospel is the rescue mission from all of that.
It's God's global rescue operation, yeah. It declares that every single person is priceless.
So if we're not fighting people, we can't just lump everyone who disagrees with us into one category of the enemy.
You can't. And that's where this tool from the pastor's notes comes in, the 10-point allegiance spectrum. It's so helpful for building compassion while keeping our clarity.
Okay, let's slow down and break this down. 10 points is a lot to take in. What are the key signposts on this spectrum?
Right. So on the far left, you have number 1, spiritual beings loyal to Satan, the source. But for our daily lives, the most relevant spots are probably 3, the deceived, and 4, the questioning.
Okay, what's the practical difference between someone who is deceived and someone who is questioning?
So the deceived, point 3, these are people totally shaped by a false worldview. It could be addiction, a skewed view of identity, whatever. They might seem hostile, but they're really captured by lies. Their anger is usually just fear. They need to be rescued.
Yeah, not questioning. Number 4.
Ugh, that is sacred ground. These are people who are just starting to feel like something's not right with their worldview. They're searching. They're open to a real conversation. And knowing that changes everything about your approach.
So you move from defense to dialogue.
Exactly. And then the center, number 6, is allegiance to Jesus Christ. That's the turning point, the start of real apprenticeship.
Right after that, you have, what was it, 7?
The saplings?
Yeah, new believers, they're fragile, they need nurturing and guidance. But see, this whole framework, it moves us away from just fear and labeling people and toward, urgency and compassion.
Okay, now we get to what I think is maybe hardest part of this passage. The advance, despite human flaws. Paul is rejoicing that Christ is being preached, even by people doing it out of envy and rivalry. I mean, that speaks right into our headlines today about fallen pastors and spiritual abuse. Doesn't that just create a theological shield for bad actors? That's the question, isn't it? It's the critical question. And the answer is no. Paul is not excusing their sin. He's asserting God's absolute sovereignty over their sin.
So how do you hold those two things at the same time? God using flawed people, but also holding leaders accountable for real abuse.
You hold them together by remembering where the power is. The power is in the message, that Jesus is alive, not in the perfection of the messenger. The sermon gave some pretty shocking biblical examples.
Like Jonah?
Jonah, yeah. He had a terrible attitude, just awful. And yet God used him to bring revival to the entire city of Nineveh. Or even Caiaphas, the high priest who was plotting to murder Jesus.
And he still prophesied the truth.
He still prophesied truth. It's a staggering reality. The gospel is bigger than the preacher. God's grace is magnified when the vessel is cracked.
But that can't be an excuse for sinful leadership.
Never. And that's why this leads to a dual call to action in our apprenticeship. One for those who lead and one for those who've been wounded by leaders.
Okay, so for those in leadership.
It's a call to purity. A daily rigorous check of your motives. Are you a shepherd laying down your life? Or are you a performer building a brand? Apprenticeship means we lead like Jesus, the servant.
And what about for those who have been, really hurt, those who carry those wounds from hypocrisy?
The first thing is to affirm so clearly that Jesus is not like them. He is the true shepherd. And then the hardest, most courageous step of spiritual boldness available to the wounded is forgiveness.
That's monumental when the pain is so deep.
It is. But forgiveness isn't about letting the perpetrator off the hook. It's about releasing yourself from being a prisoner to what they did.
Yeah.
You are handing the debt and the justice fully over to God. And that act of release is one of the most powerful forms of witness there is.
So after all that, what does this boil down to for you, the listener, right now? Paul's letter is asking us to look inward. Where are your chains?
What feels like it's silencing you?
Yeah. And the pastor gave a really simple, practical, 3-step plan for the week. This is how we start moving from being intimidated to being a messenger.
Step 1 was super simple. Just write it down. Everything that's stressing you out or shutting you down, get it on paper.
Then step 2, circle your top 3, the biggest ones, and ask God specifically, how can these become gospel opportunities?
How can you advance your kingdom through this mess?
Exactly. And then the 3rd step, which I love because it builds momentum. Take the bottom 3 things on your list. The smallest stressors.
And ask God for some early wins there.
Right.
Because those early wins, they build faith, they build confidence. If you see God work in the small constraints, your faith grows for the bigger battles. It's about taking that next small, bold step.
Yeah, whether that's forgiving someone, sharing your story, or joining that Close the Ranks prayer initiative.
The gospel isn't on pause, and we shouldn't be either.
And that's really the final thought to leave you with, isn't it? Even when chains rattle and leaders fall, Christ is still being preached. So what small, bold way will you live out your apprenticeship this week?
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us for this deep dive and for reflecting with us. We really do encourage you to check out our YouTube channel. It's still a work in progress, but we are definitely getting it better. You can find the full message there and other resources.
We'll talk to you next time.